Cleopatra and Antony, Lust, Politics, and Downfall. In the shimmering twilight of the Roman Republic, when empires trembled on the brink of collapse, two figures, one Egyptian queen, the other Roman general, found themselves entangled in a romance as vivid as it was catastrophic. Their story is not simply a tale of passion, but of power, of ambition, of empire, and ruin. This is the story of Cleopatra VII of Egypt and Mark Antony of Rome. How they met, how they loved, how they ruled, and how they fell. The Age of Turmoil. The world of the 1st century BCE was no gentle place. The once resplendent Roman Republic was fraying at its edges, torn by civil war, political ambition, and the clash between old forms and new masters. In that turmoil rose Antony, born in 83 BCE, the son and grandson of notable Roman figures. He came of age in an era of conquest and upheaval. By contrast, Cleopatra ascended to the throne of Egypt in 51 BCE, at the age of about 18. She inherited not only a kingdom, the storied land of the Nile, its monuments and its gods, but a dynasty in decline, the Ptolemaic line weakened by internal strife, and the omnipresent shadow of Rome. When she first encountered Rome and Julius Caesar, she learned early how seduction and diplomacy were intertwined. But the grandest chapter of her life would unfold not with Caesar, but with Antony. Meeting at Tarsus, seduction in spectacle. In 41 BCE, Antony found himself in Tarsus, in Cilicia, modern Turkey's southern coast, the Roman East under his command. He had sent for Cleopatra, and she arrived in a blaze of strategy, theater, and exotic display. According to sources, she traveled up the Cydnus River, aboard a gilded barge with purple sails, perfumed air wafting over the banks. Imagine the gold-spangled canopy of her ship, attendants dressed as sea nymphs, incense drifting across the river, the scent of roses or neroli carried on the breeze. Antony, used to military camps and republican formality, was confronted with a queen who performed divinity, not simply in appearance, but in calculated myth. Cleopatra as Isis Aphrodite, Antony as Dionysus. Together, they forged not only an alliance of convenience, but a union of myth and politics. In that moment, the stage was set. Cleopatra had not only captured Antony's attention, she had captured his imagination, and he, with Rome's eastern provinces in his grasp, found in her both partner and resource. Their relationship was never purely romantic. It was deeply political. Antony needed Egypt's gold, grain, and fleet to fund his wars, especially his ambitions against the Parthians. Cleopatra needed Antony's muscle and Roman legitimacy if she was to safeguard her kingdom and restore its ancient borders. In 34 BCE at Alexandria, Antony held a grand Donations of Alexandria ceremony. Cleopatra was declared Queen of Kings, her children by Antony given extravagant titles. The Roman populace recoiled. Here was a Roman triumvir giving away Roman dominions to an Egyptian queen, her children, her court. The sensory world they inhabited was one of idle splendor and dangerously blurred boundaries. Feasts that lasted for days, wine flowing beneath constellations of stars, courtiers and followers, welling with loyalty and intrigue. Cleopatra's ship, her palace halls, Alexandria's harbor, each a stage for power and performance. But Rome does not forgive easily. Gaius Octavian, later Augustus, watched Antony's drift into the east with alarm. In Rome's eyes, Antony was becoming less Roman leader and more Oriental king. The Republic's brokers whispered, "Has Antony forsaken Rome for Egypt?" And worse, Has he handed over Rome's treasure to a foreign queen? Antony's marriage to Octavia, sister of Octavian, in 40 BCE, was meant to reposition him in the Roman fold. But his continuing liaison with Cleopatra did the opposite. The seeds of downfall lay in Antony's neglect of Rome and Roman values, in his fascination with the East, and in his willingness to make Alexandria his seat of power. Cleopatra did not simply accompany Antony, she became equal partner in myth, ambition, and rule. For Rome, that was intolerable. On September 31st BCE, the decisive confrontation came. The Battle of Actium, fought in the Ionian Sea near western Greece. Antony and Cleopatra's combined fleet faced Octavian's forces, led by Marcus Agrippa. From the vantage of Antony's flagship, one can imagine the sea lit by torchlight, the sharp crack of oars, the smell of salt, sweat, and fear. The Eastern ships were larger, slower, the Romans' smaller vessels more maneuverable. Rumors say Cleopatra's fleet broke away, perhaps prematurely, or perhaps as part of a plan to retreat to Egypt. The result? Antony's forces faltered and surrendered. Rome's destiny was sealed. In the aftermath, Antony fled to Egypt, his hope still anchored in Cleopatra, and in the kingdom that she ruled and that he counted on. But the world had shifted. Alexandria would become their final theater. Back in Alexandria, the air was heavy with dread, incense, and sorrow. Antony received news, false, he believed, that Cleopatra had died. In anguish, he plunged a sword into his body. Mortally wounded, paralyzed by grief and betrayal, he was carried to her mausoleum. Cleopatra, her fate sealed, looked at the walls of her palace, at the golden diadem she wore, at the realm she had sought to save. Rome's hounds were at her gates. She refused to become a trophy in Octavian's triumph, a spectacle in Rome. According to ancient sources, she ended her life, possibly by the bite of an asp. Picture the hush of the tomb chamber, the flicker of lamps, the whispering of servants and maids. Iras, Charmian, Cleopatra reclined, regal even in death, and closed her eyes on the life she made. With Cleopatra and Antony gone, Egypt became a province of Rome. Octavian would become the first emperor, Augustus. The Roman Republic, for centuries, the political ideal, died. Their love had failed, but the consequences were vast. Yet Cleopatra and Antony remain mythic. She, the queen who spoke many languages, who held court in Alexandria, who mastered politics, patronized scholars, bargained with Rome. He, the Roman hero who lost his way by the Nile, who allowed his heart and ambition to intertwine. Their union became a warning that power and passion, when mixed, become combustible. Historically grounded though the facts are, the legend amplifies Cleopatra as temptress, as strategist, as goddess queen, Antony as warrior, lover, tragic fool. Modern scholarship seeks balance, recognizing Cleopatra's agency, Antony's contradictions. Their burial site remains elusive. Some archaeologists believe the tomb of Antony and Cleopatra lies near the temple of Taposiris Magna, west of Alexandria. A sunken port, a tunnel, a hypothesis still haunting the sands of Egypt. Reflections on lust, politics, and downfall. What does their story teach us? Lust, not merely erotic but political. Cleopatra didn't simply seduce Antony, she leveraged his ambitions. Their union was concocted in strategy and spectacle. The river arrival, the golden canopy, the incense and perfume, all were tools of power as much as romance. Politics, their affair was inseparable from empire. Antony's fate was entangled with Rome, Cleopatra's with Egypt. When they joined, they fused two spheres, the Roman East and the Egyptian world. And in that fusion lay their undoing. Rome could not tolerate an eastward Rome, an Alexandria that rivaled the city of Rome itself. Downfall. It was inevitable when love and power collide. Antony's neglect of Roman sensibilities, his immersion in the East, his public deference to Cleopatra's realm, all stirred Rome's wrath. Cleopatra's reliance on Antony and her willingness to be seen as co-ruler, and worse, royalty above Rome, sealed the politics of destruction. The sensory details matter. The crushed perfume air in the triremes banquet, the hammer of oars at dawn, the roar of flames at Alexandria, the salted tears on the Mediterranean. These are not just metaphors. They were real. They were the textures of a world unraveling. Their end was not peaceful. It was dramatic, because their lives were dramatic. Two potent figures, at the nightmare moment when old orders fell and new ones emerged. Their love was the pulse and the wound of that transition. The river arrival at Tarsus, purple sails, Egyptian musicians, the scent of incense mixing with the brine of the river mouth. Cleopatra, afloat, dressed as Aphrodite Isis, marketing a kingdom as much as wooing a general. The court in Alexandria, torch-lit halls, gold goblets, galleys anchored in the harbor, the rustle of silk, and the heavy clink of pearls. A world of plenty and politics. Rome's Senate hearing of Antony's will, the voice of Octavian reading, the Roman senators aghast. Antony bequeaths Roman territories to the children of an Egyptian queen. Public outrage. The naval Battle of Actium, dawn mist over the Ionian Sea, triremes slicing water, banner and oar in chaotic dance. Antony's fleet falters. Cleopatra's flagship slips away. Alexandria's final hour. Alexandria ablaze in late summer light, Antony wounded, Cleopatra waiting. The weight of doomed history on their shoulders. The tomb, a dark vault in Nile limestone, the murmur of wind outside, the smell of embalming oils, the embrace of two lovers as the world turns. East versus West, Cleopatra, Egyptian by birth, Greek by heritage, queen of a land older than Rome. Antony, Roman aristocrat, soldier of the Republic. Their union symbolized the meeting and clashing of two worlds, public image versus private self. Cleopatra managed her image like a monarch and a movie star combined. Antony, accustomed to Roman military virtue, allowed his private passions to invade public duty, power, and vulnerability. Cleopatra had power, but was vulnerable to Rome's juggernaut. Antony had immense power, but was vulnerable to the spill of his passions. Together, they sought to rewrite their limitations, but nature and history would not oblige. The cost of ambition. The romance is not just about love, it is about ambition. Cleopatra's ambition to preserve Egypt, to wield influence. Antony's ambition to be more than soldier, to shape destiny. Their downfall shows ambition unchecked. Why their story endures. Why does the story of Antony and Cleopatra still grip us? Because it contains every element: empire, romance, tragedy, spectacle. It reminds us that even the mightiest empires are human at their core. It asks, when power and love collide, what is sacrificed? Because Cleopatra remains enigmatic, a queen in a male-dominated world, intelligent, multilingual, politically astute, and yet written by Roman eyes that feared her power. Modern historians grapple with the portrait of Cleopatra, seductress or sovereign or both. Because Antony is tragic, a general who could have shaped Rome's future, but in a moment of joy and compromise, lost it all. His story warns that the heart does not obey Senate decrees. Imagining the final scene picture: Alexandria in August 30 BCE. The heat dances above the stone paving. The sea in the harbor is flat and heavy. Servants move silently in the palace halls. Cleopatra sits at her table, a single lamp flickering. Outside, Roman forces press the city. Antony, wounded, collapses into her arms. She touches his brow. He whispers, "Make your peace." She nods. The tomb awaits. The chamber is small. The walls are bare, save for the sarcophagus and a few draped fabrics. The scent of myrrh fills the air. Cleopatra lies beside Antony. If indeed the asp glided unseen into the basket of figs, then the final breath is silent and swift. Their alliance of kingdoms ends not with a roar, but a quiet release. The sound of sandals echoes in the corridor. Roman soldiers approach. Too late. History has already taken its course. When the dust cleared, Rome stood alone. Egypt became a province. Octavian became Augustus, the first emperor. The Republic died with that victory. And yet, centuries later, artists would paint Cleopatra in scarlet robes. Writers would dramatize Antony's final words. Filmmakers would render their love on screen. Their tomb remains unfound, somewhere near Alexandria, perhaps under water, perhaps under sand. The effort continues. But their story has been carved into memory. In the hush after their end, we may ask, was the romance folly? Was Cleopatra's seduction of Antony a grand miscalculation? Was Antony's love for Cleopatra betrayal of Rome? Perhaps. But the more poignant question: could they have played different cards? Could a queen of Egypt and a Roman triumvir have forged a stable alliance without ruin? The answer lies in the crucible of their time. Empires shifting, loyalties dividing, identities in flux. They were born into an age that demanded absolute loyalty to Rome, or die. She was born into a kingdom under threat that demanded cunning, alliance, and boldness. Their collision was inevitable. And so, we listen to the echoes: the oars in the Ionian dawn, the perfumed sails on the Cydnus, the trumpet calls at Alexandria, the silence of the tomb. We remember that love never simply redeems, it also destroys. And that power, when tangled with passion, becomes its own undoing. And so, dear listener, we close our narration of this grand, tragic drama, one of the greatest of human history. The Queen and the General, Egypt and Rome, love and politics, rise and fall. Thank you for joining me on this journey through ancient halls, ship decks, senate chambers, and tombs. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the past, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more cinematic historical narratives. Until next time, I am Mad Historian, and I'll see you in the next story.